What's up, Central Illinois business owners? We know that insurance and employee benefits are one of the most expensive, confusing, and frustrating hurdles that you face in your business today. Garrett and I work with Central Illinois businesses to create insurance and risk management programs and employee benefit solutions that reduce risk, enhance your business, and maximize your profitability. Head to CIBLinsurance.com to learn more about insurance solutions that are specifically designed for your Central Illinois businesses and to watch our educational videos about work comp, employee health insurance, commercial insurance, and other insurance products to help your business go to the next level. Go to CIBLinsurance.com. We'll see you there.
Welcome to the Central Illinois Business Leaders Podcast, where business owners, thought leaders, and community champions from across Central Illinois come to share their story. The Central Illinois Business Leaders Podcast. Anything less would be uncivilized.
What's up, Central Illinois? I'm Derek Hayden. I'm here with Garrett Ulmer. We are your hosts for the Central Illinois Business Leaders Podcast, powered by Zambu. Zambu is a delicious grapefruit or wildberry vodka-based spirit infused with a Brazilian buzz button. It's smooth, tasty, and leaves you with a signature tingle. Learn more at ZambuLiquors.com. Zambu, taste the tingle. All right, Central Illinois, today's guest is the owner of the LeaderShop. Ladies and gents of Central Illinois, please welcome Summer Davies. How are you doing, Summer?
I'm really well, Derek. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have you on the show, and I feel like your business and your topic is perfect for our audience, and we're excited to learn about that. But before we do, Summer, I'm going to kick it over to Garrett, and he's going to take you through our speed round questions.
All right, Summer. So you talked about if we could find a question that you couldn't answer, that you would give us $1 million. Was that right?
Yeah, I think it was that I'm uncomfortable answering. So
okay. Gotcha. Well, we could have 6 of the toughest questions that you're ever going to answer in your life. So when you are ready, we'll take off.
I'm ready.
First concert that you ever attended?
Whitney Houston. Bobby Brown opened for her. My dad took me for my 12th birthday. It was amazing.
Nice. Favorite movie?
Oh, well, I'm going to have a cheesy girl answer, which is Love Actually, because it is actually the best. But then to supplement that, I would say Deadpool is probably my second favorite. So I feel like that kind of balances out the check flicks.
Absolutely. So. Favorite ice cream flavor?
Mint chocolate chip all the way, every day.
Are you an iPhone or Android person?
I'm an iPhone person because I don't want to be the one on the text string that makes the color different and then everybody's mad at you. I'm not willing to take that level of heat.
Yep.
Gotcha. Favorite social media platform?
I like Instagram for personal and LinkedIn for professional.
Nice. And typically this is where we ask why Central Illinois. You're not living in Central Illinois. So why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from and why you're there?
Yeah, I'm originally from Boulder, Colorado. I'm one of the very few native Coloradans. I feel like there's less and less of us around here every day. And I've had the privilege of getting to live and work in a lot of places around the world, which is really cool as part of my previous life in corporate America. And we ended up coming back to Colorado because we love it here. We're snowboarders. We love the outdoors and love being in the mountains, being outside year round. And I know for some of your Central Illinois folks, as you're staring down the barrel of winter, that might rub rough, right? Like, but we can be outside almost year round, and so that's why we're back in Colorado.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Well, I can tell my quick story about Colorado. I've got a few stories, but the one I'll talk about is the skiing opportunity that my wife and I went on when we were fairly newly married. We'd been married for about a year, and one of my wife's good friends got a job out in Denver, and so we went to stay with her for a few days, and then we decided to drive up to Breckenridge to ski for a few days. Well, the last time I had been skiing was with the Boy Scouts, and I was probably in 3rd grade, 4th grade maybe, and at this point in time I'd have been like 27 years old when we went to Denver. So I was like, it's just like riding a bike, right? I'll figure it out. I get off the lift and I ran over a little kid. And I went flying. Little kid went flying. One ski was stuck at the top of the mountain. The other ski was down at the bottom of the mountain. And I told my wife, I was like, I'm going to the lodge. I'm going to try some of their beer and I'm done. You ski as long as you want. I'm going to go ahead and check my skis back in, but I am done. So that was my last skiing experience. And I'm guessing my last skiing experience. So
it's not for everybody. That's for sure.
Yep. Our slopes in Central Illinois are not quite like the slopes in Denver or in Colorado in general. So yeah, we'll
the only slope that we have locally, Derek, is we live in Shelbyville, Illinois, and there's we've got a nice lake around us, and we've got the dam. So kids will go sled down the dam hill, and a few people will snowboard. But a few trips down, the bad part is you don't have a lift up. So if you want to go back up, you can get wore out pretty quick. And I've seen a few kids out there trying to snowboard, but a couple trips is about it, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work, that hike back up, man.
It is. Exactly. Awesome. Well, Summer, we've taken enough of your time. Now we'll give the microphone to you. Summer, if you could just kind of give us your story, take us back as far as you'd like, bring us up to speed with what you're doing today, share anything in between that you'd like to share about your business.
Sure. So I'll start pretty far back, only because I think it's helpful in kind of contextualizing why I'm so fired up about working with the group of people I work with. So I'm a leadership coach, and there are a lot of us out there in the world, and a lot of leadership coaches focus at the top of organizations or in the middle, kind of that right before the C-suite slice. And those guys are so cool. I love working with them, and I've had the privilege to work with a lot of them, but I love frontline leaders. I love new leaders, frontline leaders. And I've had the privilege of getting to work with a lot of them and just seeing how impactful and powerful they are to organizations. And this started for me really early on, because I didn't come from a place where I was around a lot of people who worked at the top of organizations, because my family growing up happened to be quite a bit below the poverty line, right? So the people around us weren't running businesses, right? We were just trying to stay afloat. And I ended up going to school. My love for all of my life has been horses. I've ridden since I was able to work my own lessons off. And I really wanted to be a horse breeder. That was what I wanted to do with my career. I was going to breed racehorses, like on some fancy farm in Kentucky or something. I went to school. I got an undergraduate degree in equine reproduction, which is useful never to me now. And I got a job, and I wasn't super happy. So I started kind of floating a little bit, and totally by accident, I ended up running into this guy and talking about how I felt about animals and all sorts of stuff. And he said to me, I'm looking for somebody with a philosophy like that to run one of my veterinary hospitals. And it was a multi-unit veterinary hospital. And I, just like an idiot, I just said yes. No clue what I was doing. I was 23 years old. I walk in on the first day, and I'm running the hospital. I'm the hospital manager. And I've got a huge team of veterinary technicians and front end folks and veterinarians who all work for me. Mm-hmm. And I've had zero training, no preparation, no life experience to pull off of, to speak of, really. And I was a really big hot mess. And working for me was really probably quite miserable. And luckily, I had a few watershed moments that pushed me to go figure out how to fix it, because I was really determined to be successful. And I went to where you go when you're having a problem in the mid 2000s, which is an actual bookstore. And I'm just looking for a solution. I pick up a book. It's about leadership development. I read it. I couldn't afford to buy it, so I just read like a chapter and put it back, and then came back and read a little bit more. I did eventually buy it. So, Barnes & Noble, don't come after me. But it started to work. These concepts of being self-aware and leaning into adjusting to what my people needed, and being mindful around how I gave feedback or how I delegated tasks and connecting people to the vision, all of a sudden started to work. And my hospital went from like hemorrhaging money to being wildly successful really quickly. And I thought, this is my jam. I want to do this. So I was lucky enough that veterinary hospital was owned by a large corporation, a multinational corporation with about 140,000 associates. I was able to go back to school, get a master's in leadership development, and then go on to work my way up through that organization and look after leadership development for all 140,000 people. And it was so cool because I got to really see leadership in a lot of different ways, in manufacturing settings and legal settings and marketing settings. all over the world and start to isolate what is the factor that makes the difference between leaders who are really effective and those who are not so effective. Is it where they live? Is it what type of industry is it? Whatever, and it's not. And then how do we start isolating that for an organization so that they can be really mindful about how they invest and how they grow their leaders to be the type of successful that they want to be. And so I got really passionate about that. Now I get to do it full time, which is so much fun.
Very cool.
Nice.
Very cool. So you mentioned that kind of our audience is exactly who you work with. What size of organizations are you really keying in on when you work with these organizations?
You know, what I do can really work in almost any organization, but where I find the most need is in small to mid-sized businesses.
Cool.
These are the folks who don't have a fully built out L&D department, or sometimes I'm working with really small startups who don't have an anything department.
Sure.
It's just everybody trying to do their very best, right? And so they don't have time to build a big leadership development program or go leverage something else. They just need something effective and quick. And that's where I can come in and offer something that's proven, is effective, and can work in just about any industry. So that's usually who I end up working with.
Gotcha.
Very cool.
Do you have a specific type of business, or is it pretty broad as far as that goes that you like to work with?
Really pretty broad. That frontline leadership skill set is so consistent. And I've had the opportunity to look at that in all different types of settings and all different types of cultures. And the interesting thing is there are some nuances and differences, right? If you work on a manufacturing line, or you work in a car dealership, or you work in a beer dispensary, right? All of which I've worked with, right? All of those skill sets for frontline leaders are very much the same. Very, very much the same. What they need to do every day, the way that they need to engage with their people, it's the same. And they don't need something really specific because they happen to work on a railroad or they happen to work in an office.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Very cool. So once you get into an organization, without giving away your secret sauce, tell us a little bit about your process, how you start working with these leaders and what you're looking for, and then what you do moving forward.
Yeah, so I will gladly give away the secret sauce in service of humanity, because I think if we all as organizations can start looking at just some of these critical foundational pieces, it helps everyone. So the first thing that I look at is, how well do folks connect with the mission and the purpose of the organization? Do they care about working here, or would they very happily go work next door for $5 an hour more or something, which actually $5 an hour more is quite a lot. But, would they jump ship for some dollars? Sure. Or do they really believe that this organization and what they do matters? That's the first place I start to pick at. Then I start to connect to, can they just do the stuff? Can they do the day-to-day things? And for managers, this boils down to a handful of skills for me. First is, can they articulate their own purpose? So do I care about what the organization does? And do I care about what I do? And do I lead people because I want to lead people and I feel purpose in that? Or do I lead people because it was the only next step in this organization? That's a conversation that we get into, right? It really matters. And then, can I do it? Can I figure out where I spend my time and manage that really intentionally by adding value based on my role as a manager, not my previous role in many cases as an individual contributor? Can I prioritize work for myself and for others? And those are two different skill sets. And then, can I delegate that work effectively? That is one of the number one ones we run into, where folks struggle to delegate in an effective way. Can I give feedback? Can I adjust my style? And then, do I have the ability to develop others? If I can hit on all those things, those are the foundational skills for managers. So I just start looking at, where do I see these skills showing up, or not so much? And then we can make some decisions about, do you need a full program, or do you need just a little bit of help, right? Maybe your folks just need a little help delivering feedback. And so we give them a feedback model, stand them on their feet, and you see enormous improvements. Very cool. So it kind of depends on the organization, but those are the skills I look at first every time.
Awesome.
Gotcha.
Excellent.
Now we know you're from Colorado. So what type of region do you work with? Today, with Zoom capabilities and virtual settings, you can expand out, but what type of area do you work with then?
I'll work with anyone. I usually work with folks in the continental US just because of time zone.
Sure.
That seems to work best. But like I said, these skill sets are global. So I do have some organizations that I work with who have folks in other countries and that sort of thing. And it just works just as well across the space. And it's so cool to be able to say, all right, so we can do this type of work on Zoom, but let's also talk about how these skills change when you're giving feedback in a virtual way, if that happens to be the case. So it gives us some mechanism to have some different types of conversation as well. So I can work with folks anywhere in the US.
Nice.
Very cool. Now, one of the things we kind of talked about before we started recording was some people, especially in today's world where you maybe have some that are working remotely, that aren't in the office, and a lot of managers are trying to stay on top of their employees, making sure they're getting their stuff done, and may tend to become a micromanager. So tell us a little bit about your philosophies about micromanaging, what you see, and some of the, I guess, the cures that you can put in place to help those that may be micromanaging a little too much.
Yeah. So let me ask you, when you say micromanagement, does that feel like a really positive word to you, or maybe not so positive?
I would say negative.
Negative.
Absolutely.
Yeah, most people will. And I think that this is important because when we're starting to talk about micromanagement, it always comes in with a super negative connotation. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is even more of this type of behavior following the pandemic, mostly because we see folks who are struggling to figure out how to work in a hybrid environment. There's a really cool study about what Microsoft is seeing if they study Teams, how much time people are spending on Teams calls versus what they were 5 or 10 years ago. And how much time people are spending on Teams calls, but also doing other things in the background. So that's a really cool one if you want to think about where folks might be micromanaging by encouraging people to be on all these meetings all the time. So that's one that I think is cool to call out. The other really important thing I like to call out is most micromanagers are not bad people. In fact, micromanagement often comes from an excess of good intention. And my favorite micromanager in the world is Michael Scott. So if you think about Michael Scott, and ironically, he's the worst, right? He is the worst micromanager. And he is also a really well-intended person. He wakes up in the morning and he thinks, I love being a leader. My team loves me and we're going to go do great work, right? In his head, his intention is really positive. His impact is missing the mark. And so I call that out because, as we just said, we think micromanagement is a negative thing. And often it's because somebody has the intention to say, I have so much knowledge, I want to give it to you, which then translates to I'm just going to tell you how to do things. Or I want to help you. And so I'm going to help you to death and just get in your way. And so those people are not ill-intended. They're not waking up in the morning saying, I am just going to belittle my people. I'm going to give them, I'm going to tell them that this is their project, but then take it away to make them feel like I think they're stupid. That nobody is doing that unless they're a sociopath, which is a really different problem to solve. They are not aligning their intention to their impact. And so helping them go back to those skill sets that I said, get clear about, where do you spend your time? How do you add value as a leader? How do you delegate effectively? And how do you check in with somebody else to make sure that your perception of effective delegation is actually meeting their need? These are really nuanced skills and they're not rocket science, but it does just take that moment of self-realization to be able to get into it. And again, coming back to, we don't think these people are ill-intended or bad people or bad managers. They just need some skills help, and we can fix that really easily and help them then step away from micromanaging and kind of getting into that nice middle ground where they're meeting their people's needs, they're adding value, and they feel great energy as well from the interactions that they're having.
Awesome.
I'm assuming you run into a few hurdles every so often, because I think we see most leaders are what? Alphas. They like to be in power. They like to be in control, especially if they own their small business. It would be hard to delegate, right? We hear that a lot with what Derek and I do. They wear every hat. They want to wear every hat, and they don't want to shove other things off. So I'm assuming that initial process can be a little tough sometimes, just to get somebody to assess and say, hey, I've got to step back. I've got to do this in a different way.
Oh, yes. So every interaction has its own unique challenges, but here's what I would say. There's a little bit of a misnomer about what alpha behavior truly is. So a true alpha would have clarity about where they add value and be able to say, I am no longer the doer, right? I'm not the one making the sausage anymore. My job is to make it easier for those guys to be able to do it. And so when you have somebody who might have an alpha personality and want to be in charge, helping them understand that true alphas are able to step firmly into that new place of where they add value, that can be a big watershed moment. And it often doesn't take a terribly long time to help somebody see that if they truly have that alpha personality, that they want to step into that, right? And one of my favorite examples is Napoleon, who was a true alpha, and he's such a great character. I'm a history buff, so he's a great character to get into. But right, he wasn't running the cannons, right? He's not out on the front lines. That doesn't mean he wasn't an effective leader, and it doesn't mean that he wasn't adding enormous value to his troops, but he's not loading the cannons. And helping a true alpha be able to understand, you got to step back, clarify what good looks like, and then let them figure out how to deal with whatever comes in front of them. That's what makes you truly powerful. That can be huge for some individuals. Now, when you run into individuals who are not really wanting to be in that kind of alpha stance and doesn't really want to lean into that type of power, then helping them understand, well, why am I leading people? Is it truly because I want to engage teams and help make more than what I could do on my own, using the Napoleon example, right? He's not going to conquer anything on his own. He's like 4 feet tall. Is it truly because I want to do that? Or am I leading people because it is the only way up in my organization? If that's the answer and it doesn't necessarily align with that alpha personality, totally fine. Let's define leadership in your way so that we can help you get clear and still not be a micromanager and still feel comfortable if you don't happen to have that same assertion in your personality. You can be an enormously effective leader, even if that's not who you are.
Yeah.
In that alpha type way.
So one thing that we're seeing a lot, maybe it's just in our industry, because Garrett and I are in the insurance industry, by the way. It is getting more difficult for insurance agencies to find solutions for their clients, and rates are going up, and there's so much more work in today's world versus even 2-3 years ago. And I can feel it in our office. I feel like people are getting more and more burnout by the day. Like it just that we don't have enough, what was easy to do 2 or 3 years ago has now become very, very difficult. And people are just trying to fight to stay ahead, and they're getting burnout of the same issues popping up day in, day out. What do you see when you work with leaders, and how do you help solve or at least relax groups when it comes to burnout?
Burnout is a hot topic right now, unfortunately. And it is very true for sure in your industry and in many others who are facing similar types of challenges where things are just more complex. The pace is just faster. And then, as we mentioned, in the hybrid environment, you've got people who are attending just more meetings. We just statistically know we're spending more time in meetings, and more people are multitasking in those meetings, which just creates such fatigue on your brain. It is a huge mountain to climb. So when this comes up on Teams, which it does so often, really, again, coming back to, well, why do we do this work? What's the purpose of this work? And then for leaders to be able to help get them to clearly articulate, what does a good outcome look like? And then how do I engage and energize my people around getting there in perhaps a way that I could never have thought of, because my ways are the ways that worked before. And what we need is a way that is going to work with the challenges we have today, and feel comfortable letting go of the process a little bit. When we're holding so tight onto that process and saying, well, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is what has always worked, but that got you the solution you always got. This is an old adage. You need a new solution, so you need a new process. And if you are a leader who is so tied to that process, shifting your thinking and saying, okay, I'm going to bring in some people with a diversity of thought to help us come up with some creative solutions. I'm going to engage them, and then I'm going to get the heck out of the way and let them do that, and be there if they need a coach, if they need a mentor, if they need a safety net, of course, right? You're not abdicating leadership and peacing out. You're still going to be there to help them, but really starting to get comfortable letting go of the process. And that sounds so beautiful and Pollyanna in the moment, but it's hard. It's hard to do the first few times you really start to do it, and to take your ego and say, how do I add value?
Sure.
Am I adding value by saying, no, it's got to be step 1, 2, 3, if I see them taking some other steps? That can help so much, because not only does it allow the leader to step away a little bit and get their brain back a little bit and get a little bit more energy, it engages your team. And burnout comes when you're doing all this work, but you don't feel energy from it. You're not getting that reward from it. When you think back to the experiences maybe you've had on the hardest projects or the biggest things you've done, probably worked harder than ever in your life on those projects. But if you really cared about them, you weren't burnt out. You were excited. And so if you can start creating those types of environments around what seems like really cumbersome or challenging or complex tasks, you might see just tremendously amazing results. But you have to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to take my ego out of here. I'm going to get clear about where I add value. And I'm going to step back and start engaging this team. And I used a term there that I use pretty often, which is diversity of thought. And how do you start getting some new ways of thinking in the room to create new solutions to these new problems we change? Always have the same types of approaches. You're gonna have some struggle. And that is not my term. That is an Abraham Lincoln ripoff. He was all about creating diversity of thought and having some different perspectives to find new solutions.
Very cool. Very cool.
So tell us a little bit about, for our listeners that would maybe be interested in speaking with you, how would they go about reaching out to you? How could they, schedule some type of a consultation or something of that matter?
Yeah, so you can find me a couple different ways. I'm on LinkedIn, really easy to find me there. You can find me through my website as well. Make sure that that's linked for your listeners. And there's a couple things that we can chat about. We can talk about really big solutions, like programs that are already built for frontline leaders to go through. I've got a 90-day program that's showing really amazing results. Put a frontline leader through, takes about 90 days to get them through the program. And then we see all those skills starting to build that foundation in that program. But then I've also got solutions that are more one-off to say, hey, if you just want to boost your feedback skills in your organization or your delegation skills, let's get an off-the-shelf solution for just those skill set for your folks. So lots of creative ways to fit within the many different budgets and timeframes and bandwidth that folks come with around developing their leaders.
Very cool. Nice. Well, I'm looking at your website, which again is leader-shop.com. And we talked a little bit about micromanagement earlier in the podcast. You have a free assessment tool, a free micromanager assessment tool. Tell us a little bit about that tool and what people can expect when they go check it out.
Yep, absolutely free. You can download it right on my website anytime you want. And that tool is designed to help somebody who just wants a little bit of a window. So if you were listening to us talk a little bit about what is a micromanager, where does it come from? And there was some very small alarm bell that went in your head that goes, oh my gosh, I really hope I am not a micromanager, but I'm not quite ready to go ask my people if I am. This might be a great way to just peek under the hood and just see what's going on. Maybe your headspace is, I'm totally nailing it. And you take the assessment and the answer is you are absolutely right where you want to be. Cool. Or maybe you're thinking, oof, maybe I'm not in the weeds enough. Maybe I'm more of an abdicating style manager and I want to know if maybe I need to show up a little bit more. This is a totally private way to do that assessment on yourself. Now, I am not advocating you do this. However, I've heard that people have used the assessment in this way, that you can print it out and just like slide it onto someone's desk anonymously if you wanted to give them some feedback. That is not an effective way to give feedback. However, you could use the assessment in that way if you want.
There you go. Perfect. So obviously, this is the Central Illinois Business Leaders Podcast. So for all the leaders listening, before we jump off of here, Summer, can you tell us maybe one tip or piece of advice for the leaders that are listening that maybe will help them become a more effective leader?
Yep. This is one of the questions I ask when I first start working with leaders. So this is just a quick preview. Start tomorrow and just take a little piece of this scratch paper or something like that and start to identify or log how often you are answering questions and how often you are answering a question with a question. So this will help you start to identify, where are you adding value? Are you a giver of knowledge and the solver of all the problems? Or are you enabling your people to solve problems? And if you find that you are the one who's answering all the questions and you are the one giving all of the solutions, that's a really great place to start thinking about, how am I adding value and how can I start unlocking value in my people?
Very cool. Very cool. Well, for all you loyal listeners out there, make sure you're subscribing to the CIBL podcast on your favorite podcast platform. While you're there, please leave us a review. It'd be greatly appreciated. You can also find us on social media, mainly LinkedIn and Facebook. You can connect with Garrett and I there personally as well. Until next time, Summer, you have officially been civilized. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, guys. This is a fun conversation. And now I got to go find out what Zambu is. I don't know what Zambu is.
There you go.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Central Illinois Business Leaders Podcast. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/CIBL Podcast. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It's the civilized thing to do.
What's up, Central Illinois? You know what you all need? You all need some CIBL podcast swag. And thanks to our newest sponsor, Jedco Sales, you can now find our swag at CIBLmerch.com. You can find t-shirts, sweatshirts, polos, hats, and more, all classically adorned with our famous CIBL podcast logo. If you want to represent and support your favorite podcast, check out CIBLmerch.com. That's CIBLmerch.com. If you like our store, you can also build your very own business swag store with the help of Jedco Sales in Effingham, Illinois. Jedco is owned by previous CIBL guests, Andrew and Laren Dial. They've set up a special discount offer for CIBL guests and listeners to set up your very own custom branded swag store. You can now offer branded apparel to your employees, customers, and fans, and Jedco will fulfill all the orders for you. Contact Jedco at sales@jedcosales.com. That's sales@JEDCO sales.com, and tell them that Garrett and Derek sent you. Let Jedco help you get noticed.